Hi, YouTube fans. This is Matt of Post April 6th YouTube channel. How are you today? How are you this evening? Whichever time of the day you're seeing this YouTube vlog. Well, what I thought I would do again, because I've been doing this a lot lately, is I am going to read an unfinished story idea that I wrote a considerable amount of time ago. Hold on a minute, I'll be right back. I went to go verify this. It was created on February 12th, 2021. And as I have stated before, this was back in the day before I moved back here to Denver, Colorado, and I was still in Huntington, West Virginia. And I think that was the day after I experienced a very terrible, quite upsetting electricity blackout. I was, and I kid you not, without electricity for at least 14 hours. That made me really, really, really upset. Yes. I wanted to leave right then and there. The state of West Virginia was so upset, and I was so embarrassed. But anyways, that's water under the bridge now. Okay, what the story is about a young man named George Tobias Fields. And the story starts about what he does to save his mother from death. I'm not kidding. And then a few months later, he, or shall I say, actually about a year later roughly, he says something quite cold and uncalled for to his mother. And, you know, back in those days, corporal punishment and hitting a child to do discipline was a hell of a lot more common than it is now. You know, this was almost 100 years ago. It was that long ago. Yeah. And she slapped his face several times, and she said, because you called me this word, you're the son of Satan. Yeah, she was pretty mad. Okay, so why don't I go right ahead and start reading the story. George Tobias Fields was a man who was born on May 22nd, 1913. Before I go any further, one of the people that was born in 1913 that is a former president of the United States was this man, Richard M. Nixon. Now, was he the absolute worst president we ever had? Nope. But how he dealt with the Watergate cover-up, even though he didn't do the burglary himself, was a big no-no. I mean, he really panicked. And he handled things wrong, and he should have said 5 words back in 1972. I covered up, I was wrong, I'm sorry. But he didn't do that. And he winds up resigning from President of the United States because he was literally this close to being impeached by first the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate. This close. Yeah. He was in a terrible turmoil before about roughly August 6th or 7th of 1974. Okay, back to the story. Okay, so let me start at that sentence again so everything makes perfect sense. Was born on May 22nd, 1913 at Cranston, Rhode Island. This is a city that exists. One of the oldest parts of the East Coast area. Of the United States. When he was 16 years old, his father tried to strangle to death his own mother. And George was brave. He snuck up behind his father and had a large Winchester semi-automatic 12-gauge Magnum shotgun that contained 4 rounds of 12-gauge 3-inch Magnum buckshot loaded into the magazine with 1 in the chamber. And immediately he reversed the positioning of the shotgun and accosted him with the butt of the shotgun 4 times to stop his father, who was drunk at 6 times the legal limit and consumed amphetamines. I mean, the type of amphetamines he had, I personally assume was Benzedrine or something a little more powerful than that. It was not crystal meth, because crystal meth hadn't been invented by that. The amphetamines that he obtained illegally and saved his mother's life from death. After August of 1929, the remainder of the year ended on a positive note. George's dad, Billy John, was incarcerated. Excuse me, that was a slip of the tongue. Billy John was incarcerated at the state penitentiary and remained there for over 5 years. And his mother had lots of monies to live on. After the savings Billy John accumulated, that was over $7,357 and change. And the mother and son qualified for welfare benefits of non-working families in Rhode Island. George's mother, Josephine Sanders, actually be Josephine Sanders Fields, aged 46. Okay, before I read this story, the time that she was born, his mother was born around 1882 or 1883. And George got along pretty well most of the time. George was a good guy, but one night he argued with his mother about a radio program. That was a police drama radio program played on the radio. And after arguing about listening to the program too much, George called his loving mother a filthy word. He called her a butchy, hard-nosed cunt. You don't talk to a mother like that. And his mom slapped his face 11 times. Because when you say those really filthy words to a mother back then, oh boy, you're going to get hurt. Yeah, he slapped his face really hard and made him so scared. He was shaking and wet his pants really bad. Then his mother yelled, "You're not even sorry for calling me a cunt! You should be sorry, you son of Satan!" That's the best woman voice I could do. Then he sat down on the dining room chair and closed his eyes really. He closed his eyes and said in a crying fit tone, "All right, Mother, I'm sorry." I better go to my room now. I'm a really bad boy. And he stands up and he goes up to his room. I mean, he marches up the stairs fast, so his mother doesn't start smacking him again or start throwing something at him. Then he stands up, walks up to the room and shuts the door, and goes into a major crying spree until he falls asleep. Then he wakes up at 7:41 a.m. and takes a good bath. And then as he is bathing, his mother calls on to him with the bathroom door shut. "George?" "I will have pancakes and sausage links and your favorite maple oatmeal ready in the kitchen soon. Be ready to eat in the next 10 to 15 minutes, okay?" "Okay, Mother. I will be ready soon." And his mother walked away, and George finished washing up and dried off and got himself shaved with a straight razor and brushed his teeth with tooth powder and applied underarm deodorant. The underarm deodorant was more likely like a powdery substance instead of like what we find in grocery stores and department stores nowadays and drugstores. And then he got dressed in a Henley long-sleeve shirt, wool trousers, and gray athletic socks. Oh, slip of the tongue again. And gray socks. The wool pants were like a light tan or like a brownish color, more than likely, back then. Okay, let me keep reading. And donned on some well-made leather shoes, because this is before athletic shoes and tennis shoes, and regular casual shoes had a distinct hard, thick leather on them. And prayed to the Lord, "Our Heavenly Father, I have committed a terrible sin last night by slandering my mother and my biological creator. I ask that me and my mother get along today. Amen." As he was standing up and placing his tweed fabric English flat cap on, he opened the door and walked en route to the dining section of the large kitchen. Okay, so what happened is his mother made it for him, and she was really nice to him, and she kissed his head, and she says, "I love you, son. I'm sorry I had to discipline you yesterday, but you should never, ever, ever talk to a woman like that." She said, "God will not reward you. He could seriously punish you when you die." And then after they were done, they took turns, because this is probably before automatic dishwashers. They took turns, or they had a system in place to hand wash the dishes. And then they made a grocery list. And they went to a grocery store, and for what you would probably pay over pay over $40 to $50 for, they probably got for $6 to $7, or possibly even less than that. In fact, that was 1929, more like $4 at the most. And I mean, they got a bunch of stuff. They didn't just get a loaf of bread and a little, a little mix of like a gravy. I mean, they got steak, eggs, bacon, a couple of loaves of bread, coffee. Probably got one of those, and this would be thick glass, unlike plastic. They got a couple of things of Coca-Cola, 2 or 3. It wasn't part of a 6-pack. It was like 2 or 3. They got some what now is called bath tissue toilet paper, and they got some glass cleaner, and they got a few other little things. It's probably about $4. Yeah. And they had probably at least 4 bags full of stuff. Yep. And they go home, and George does some reading. Let's see, back then police dramas weren't in as big as they are now, but he just might have had a connection where he could have some police drama magazines sent to him, and I bet you it cost at least $2 to $3 a year. I mean, $2 to $3 a year was pretty expensive back then. It's pretty expensive. And then they listened to a couple of different programs on the radio. And I think somewhere, this would be roughly around 7 or 8 p.m. Eastern Time, they got a phone call from an uncle, or it would be an uncle to him, but a brother to her, or a brother-in-law. And excuse me again. And they just had a good evening. Okay, so let me fast forward to later on in life. By 1941, okay, I'm back. I had to go get a little sip of coffee because I was yawning too much and I hadn't smoked my pipe yet. I needed to smoke my pipe. Okay, so in about a little after the Pearl Harbor, which happened in December 1941, I believe it was December 7th, he doesn't get drafted like that. But in about January or February of 1942, he gets drafted. And he doesn't try to check it out because he really wants to be part of this. He wants to be one of the men. He wants to be one of the people that will save this world from total ending of the world or apocalypse. He gets in the army. He gets along with most of the soldiers. A few of them make fun of him a little bit, but they're not really mean. He puts on, or he loses about probably about 20 pounds, and he really gets muscular and really buff. Pretty, within like a couple of months. And he gets involved in some really bloody gun artillery battles with well, they didn't have AR-15s back then, but M1 machine guns and 45 ACPs and all kinds of stuff. Oh yeah. And he doesn't get shot once. He comes close, one goes over his back. And all they do is they give him treatment and then they let him go. They let him get back out in the field. And one of the other things that happens is there is several American soldiers being that are missing in action. They're being held hostage, and he figures out a way to make one of them talk. I mean, he doesn't use any guns, but he just keeps shouting back and forth, and this one guy, he slaps him. And then this other guy, and then he keeps fighting back and keeps talking back to him. And he knows the Japanese language. He keeps talking back to him, and then he slaps him again. And he slaps him again. And then finally, this guy really starts squealing at him, and he takes this hand. And I mean, normally I wouldn't want to see something like this happen, but he grabs him under the crotch. And he squeezes him really hard, and he says, talk, 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 tell us, talk, 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 like that. And finally he starts talking. I mean, he really starts singing like a bird about everything. I mean, even though he's crying, he's doing it, and he wants something to eat, and he says, and the guy says, and he gets out he gets out some chains or some handcuffs, and he handcuffs him. He says, and he says in plain English, "Stay right here and don't move. And if you shit your pants, I'm gonna shove it down your throat." Probably said something about like that. And he goes out, and he finds a fishing pole, and he catches it for him. And there's a little gas stove, or not outright junk, but what would be called kind of primitive or limited skill. And he says, "All right, cook, quick." and take me where you said all this is, because I got to report this. And then he goes, and then he follows him, and he's got a gun. He's got a pistol in one hand, and he's got a M1 in the other, or a rifle. Yeah. Or if it's not that, it's a pistol in one hand and a heavyweight sap. One of those things about this long and about that big around. Yeah. I mean, when he really thumps him upside the head, he makes him hurt bad. You don't want to move. And then they go there, and then he has this thing wrapped around his shoulder. It would be, well, there's a military name for it, but it would be like a PA system or whatever, something like that, where he tells him on the phone. You know, like what I've seen in those World War II movies. And he tells him, and a whole bunch of shoulders, or soldiers come in, and they start taking him away. And all the POWs are hauled off in several jeeps. Yeah. And his either his superior or his commander really gives him quite a lot of pats on the back for this one. And after World War II ended in I don't remember for sure, but I think it was roughly around August of 1945. He remains in the Army for one more year. But even though he has pretty important responsibilities, he doesn't, it's a lot less stressful than what he was doing in artillery. It's basically him doing some night watch stuff at one of the U.S. Army military bases. That would be, if it's not Japan, it's probably somewhere in Asia. And then he gets honorably discharged from the Navy in, I'm going to say about September or early October of 1946. And he doesn't want to be in. He doesn't want to be in the East Coast anymore, because some of them winters, I don't know how much it snows in that part of New England, East Coast, northeast United States. But I bet you it gets very cold in the winter, very cold. So, as part of a GI Bill or GI honorably discharged benefits, he gets a job set up where he takes a flight to I don't know if, I want to say LAX, but it may not have been LAX as we know it now. But the Los Angeles International Airport. And he has somebody from the one of the Army bases nearby greet him there. And he first takes him out for lunch, then he takes him to the apartment that he gets. The apartment is located just out of coincidence, probably less than a mile from the original Los Angeles Police Department or L.A.P.D. headquarters building. The original one. He gets a job doing some work for a very big name bank. It might be Bank of America. Or it might have been something California Bank. It was a specific location that was the corporate headquarters. And he was a night watchman. He was there from 6 p.m. until 12 a.m. And the earnings that he was getting from per week would probably be the equivalency of, let me do some mathematics here really quick, of $67.50 per week. $67.50 per week in 1946. Big bucks. Earning $67 a week back then would be the equivalency now of earning over $5,000 a month. Maybe even greater than $5,000 a month. He had a nice apartment that he was probably renting for, I would say, about $35 to $40 a month, because believe me, $35 to $40 a month was a pretty big expense back in the day. What you paid for back in 1946 that cost $35 to $40 a month would be the type of apartment where it would range between $1,350 a month to over $2,200 a month now, depending on what part of the United States you're in. Yeah. And he did the night watchman job for about 4 years until he just got tired of it, because, you know, even though he had a lot of rounds to tit and a lot of little things to look at, it was boring. And after, let's see, I think it was No, I take that back. He did that for about a little over a year. So in about 1948, he was on a week's vacation because that building was going to have some renovation work done to it. That was only going to take a week to do. And he was in a diner eating breakfast one morning, and he was looking through the Help Wanted ads of the L.A. Times, or a Los Angeles newspaper that was popular back then. And he bumped an army buddy noticed him, and he said, "What do you?" And George said to, we'll call this guy Frank. George said to Frank, he says, "Frank, what are you doing now?" He says, "You don't know." He says, "No. You don't have a significant uniform on." He says, "I don't need one." And he pulls out his badge. He's a detective with Los Angeles, with L.A.P.D. He hadn't been a detective for at least a couple of years. Yeah. And the two sat there and talked for at least 45 minutes. And then they exchanged phone numbers. And then the two talked over the phone for probably over half an hour. And the next day, he puts in I think what will be called entrance application of employment to be with L.A.P.D. And he had 3 different separate interviews on 3 different days. On the 3rd interview, they called him the next day and told him, "You've been offered employment with LAPD. We're going to start you out as patrolman." And he gave a 2 weeks notice at the bank, and then he started to go through the police academy and get trained. And he was a patrolman, and he knew from being I guess what would be called an observer, when a really good detective would know how to question. He had the intelligence to realize how the detectives were good, but they should have said this to him instead of that, or they should have done this instead of that. They should have entered the room with this demeanor instead of that demeanor. They should not have waited this long. They should have came in right away. You know, he knew some things that most of them didn't know. And he, after a year and a half of being a patrolman, let's see, this would have been about 1950 roughly. He talked with the personnel manager about whom he should talk with about taking the exam to become a detective. And then he took the first test, and he came this close to pulling off, but he didn't do it. So he waited another month, and then he took it again. And he did a lot of studying. He got really schooled on how to do better at the exam the next time. And when he took the second test, boy, he passed in flying colors. and he got interviewed by, he had one interview by two different sergeants at once. And then the second interview was with a lieutenant detective. And then the third interview was with a chief of detectives. And then the fourth interview, this all happened within a period of about 8 to 9 days. The police commissioner interviewed him. And boy, did he thoroughly question him, but good. And even though he had a little bit of shortfalls, there was still a lot of things, I mean a lot, that impressed the police commissioner. And the police commissioner said, well, if you're going to work here, you should do this, and 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 this. And then he says, after thoroughly questioning you, and after me feeling that you will hone your skills and work on some of the shortfalls that I've noticed about you, I think you're going to make a good detective. We'll go ahead and I will sign the documents and fill out the paperwork to have you transferred from patrolman to a detective. And it took about 2 to 3 weeks to process all of that. And then he had 3 days off in a row. And then he comes in early in the morning. We're talking 6 a.m. Yeah. And they start doing some really detailed orientation to get him broke in. And one of the things they noticed about him is, even though he knew how to have the right restraint and not go over the edge, that guy could get with some of those violent people and he'd keep a pretty straight face. And he knew when to get real tough with them and grab them by the arm and say, "You don't talk to me like that, you son of a bitch. You want to go to jail for the rest of your life? Because you were this close to going. You say that word to me one more time, I'm going to press some serious charges against you, you son of a bitch. Knock it off. Knock it off. I mean it." And I got the guy to calm down. And then even though he said, I'm sorry 3 times, says, "It's going to be more than sorry. I'm telling you, you better stop. If I have to tell you one more time, I'm not even going to bother to tell you. I'm going to grab your arms. I'm going to put your ass in handcuffs. I'm going to haul you down to prison. I'm going to haul you down to county jail. I'm going to haul you down to county jail. I mean it. I mean it. There's no time to play games. You better play it straight and man up and confess up to everything that's going on here and tell us the truth this time." Yeah. And then after 1953, he became a sergeant. And in late 1954, he became a lieutenant detective of homicide. Because this guy helped solve over 15 unsolved murders. And the crime rate was going noticeably low. Not just in that particular area near that part of Los Angeles. The whole Los Angeles metro area was going down significantly. Yes. And then he was getting to the point where he was, it might have been Pepto-Bismol or it was some type of antacid because his stomach developed an ulcer, man. It did. And he was watching what he was eating. But one day his stomach was really hurting bad. And he took more antacids than usual, and he drank a little more milk than usual. And that helped to a point. And then things were starting to feel better and better and better. And then all of a sudden he feels really nauseous and he runs in the bathroom and he really starts throwing up. And then he has bad pain. He's all going, and he calls up, help! 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 And 2 detectives run in. He says, call an ambulance. I'm having a bleeding ulcer. And there's like blood all over, drip running out of both sides of his mouth. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And they did emergency surgery on his stomach, gastrointestinal and digestive system surgery. Yeah. He was in bad shape. And he was placed on sick leave for about a month. And then he comes in and he talks it over after he's feeling pretty good, but he's just like, as much as I love my job, I don't want to do this anymore. I really don't. So he talks it over with the personnel, and the personnel then, after he waits in a waiting area for about 45 minutes, has the chief of police and a couple of his other people with him to talk things over. And they basically said at the end of by the time of the conversation, he says, we're going to see that you get awarded at least a 75% pension benefits. And his pension benefits, let's see, back then this was almost say about 1955, 1956. Probably at least $305. That's the best guess I can make. And he lays low and he enjoys just taking it easy and relaxing. And then one day, because he stopped smoking, then all of a sudden he really wants to have a cigar, bad. Because he was reading a book, and then he'd look out the window, and then there'd be one guy smoking a cigar, and then he'd be reading, and he sees out of the corner of his eyes he's reading, and he looks up at the guy. There's another guy smoking a cigar. I mean, there's like 10 people within about less than a half hour. There's over 10 people walking. One guy's got a pipe, and the other 9 of them got cigars, and the cigars smell really good. I mean, he can tell they're high-dollar cigars. So he looks in the yellow pages to make sure where all the cigar shops are. And he decides on the one that he knows a lot of people, he's known for years that they have a pretty high regard for this place. And he sits in the area that would be the lounge. And he smokes a nice Maduro cigar. And it's good, but boy does it give him a buzz. After he smoked it, I mean, he was just like, ooh. And he says, oh my God, I'm really buzzed. What do I do? He says, go eat. He says, go down there and eat a good-sized cheeseburger. That'll cure it. And I says, well, I don't want chicken. He says, we'll go to them for some turkey. And some turkey and gravy and mashed potatoes. Ask them. They'll make it for you. And if they don't know if they can, he says, use my name. Tell them I asked you to ask them. They'll do it. Trust me. So he goes over there and without having to say the guy's name, they did it for him. And he has a milkshake, vanilla milkshake. And he thinks to himself, you know, I really want to open a tobacco shop. I really do. And he starts thinking and thinking and thinking about it. So what he does is he calls the business development people, or LA County Business Development, either division or association, whatever. He talks to a guy who really smokes cigars, and you know, you can tell because the guy's voice kind of about like this, you know, because his voice is kind of gravelly. He talks to that guy, and that guy gives him some valuable advice. He says, go to the public library. Go to the reference department. Ask to see these types of reference material for tobacco industry and manufacturing. And the guy just keeps going through page after page after page after page after page after page after page. And he brought one of those little notebooks you can fit in your shirt pocket. He starts, just with a nice ballpoint pen, he keeps writing down name, company and phone number, and company and phone number, and company and phone number, company and phone number. And then he sees some images on this one reference manual or reference book, and he asks the librarian if he would be so allowed to do Xerox copies, and she shows him how to use the printer, and he puts out probably at least 25-30 cents for copies. And believe me, back then that was spending a hell of a lot of money, because he prints out like at least 24 pages and stuff. I mean, he really goes to town. And he goes to a cheap but pleasant diner. He gets a grilled ham sandwich with French fries and a slice of apple pie. And he goes to this one smoke shop that's like 2 blocks away from the place to eat. Because see, it's about 6 o'clock at night, and this place is open until 8 o'clock because it's so popular. And he spends some time there, and he looks around at all the pipes, and he decides on a Sheraton. Yep. This is before they did what's called, the Sheraton made what's called double comfort stems. May have been a pipe similar, done similar to this one. Yeah. And it has a nice settled bit, about like that. Maybe a little bit narrow and a little bit flatter, but about the same style of what's called saddle bit. And he buys some Virginian pipe tobacco that's light. It's not too heavy. And he buys a tamper, and he buys some pipe cleaners. And he buys a nice Zippo lighter with some fluid. I think all of that probably set him back almost $20. I mean, that's big time back then. Big time. Well, no, I take it back. Let's see, was a Sheraton? Probably about $14 to $16, but no more than that. Goes back to his apartment, lights up the pipe, turns on the TV, watches some good old TV programs, and just really has a ball. And then what he does is he calls the business development man again, and asks him to if he has any knowledge of where would be a good place to start a tobacco shop in an area where they probably need one, because it's far away from the area where the closest one's like over a mile away. And he knows of a vacant spot. If it is where I'd like it to be, in fact, hell, I'll just go ahead and say it. It's going to be on Franklin Avenue in Los Angeles 90028. I think the cross streets would be near Franklin and Bronson. And he, there's a vacant spot, and he goes by there, and he doesn't enter, but he just stands from the outside looking in, about like this. You know, trying to anticipate how it looks. Writes down the phone number of the leasing company, goes back to his apartment, calls him, and the next day he sets up an appointment to go see it. And then he has he had a few dollars saved up. So he's got enough as the saying goes, startup cash. To at least get the building, and then he gets some personal loans that pay for the rest, supplies, construction that needs to be done to that place, decor, furnitures, all kinds of stuff that needs to be set up. And it takes him a couple of months to get things in order to open up. And the day he opens up, in about 1956, early 1957, he is busy as hell. In fact, he's so busy, he goes about 4 hours without being able to go to the bathroom. And when he does, he runs in the back and he really lets loose. Ooh, boy. He'd been holding it forever. He almost peed his pants. And the next day, well, after he opens up, he figured out what to do for lunch. And there's a nice pizza joint about a little over a block away. And they are so grateful, they offer to give him a calzone with pepperoni and a little bit of onion, a little bit of bell pepper. Yeah. And he only eats half of it, and he drinks some milk and says, I don't want an ulcer again. So I'll just leave it at that for now. And I tell you, for another 20 years, he had that place going until he sold it. Because by about 1977, he's getting old. He was... Let me count this again just a minute. He was about 64 in 1977. And he thought to himself, it's time for me to fully retire. I'm getting too old for this. And I'm gonna get established with Social Security retirement. I've had enough. And sure enough, he's still getting money from L.A.P.D. pension. There's probably a different name for that, but you know what I mean. Well, everyone, it's time for me to go. Thank you, everybody, for listening to all this. And happy smoking. And thank you very much that I have 94 subscribers. And goodbye.